I think I'm turned on now, okay. So many times you've heard preachers say, and I think I'm a little hot right now, but you've heard preachers say, I might as well give the invitation to go home now after that. That was so beautifully done, but I've never heard a preacher just step down and do that. You're not going to hear it today either. Thank you, Marissa, Craig. What a beautiful rendition of a beautiful hymn. Let the church be the church. We want to talk about the church today, and Paul wrote the church at Ephesus. If you'll turn with me to Ephesians chapter 2. And while you turn into Ephesians chapter 2, I'm going to cheat a little bit and read a couple of verses from Ephesians chapter 1. It's not my text, but you turn to Ephesians chapter 2. And the last two verses of Ephesians chapter 1, Paul said this, God put all things under his, Jesus' feet, and gave him to be head over all things in the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. God put Jesus over the church. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And Paul's showing a mystery to the Gentiles in Ephesus. He's showing a mystery to them. You need to know this. This is something new, Paul's saying. Jesus Christ is here for the Gentiles as well as for the Jews. Hold on to that. That's you. That's me. And now, beginning with verse 19 in Ephesians chapter 2. Now, therefore, you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom the whole building being fitted together grows into a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are being built together for a dwelling place of God in the Spirit. And may God add his blessings this morning to this, the reading of his word. And you know, it's a beautiful testimony there of the church. The Apostle Paul starts out by talking about foreigners and sojourners, two different Greek words that the Apostle uses. He's talking about people that are living in a land that's not really there. Some of them are truly foreigners. Some of them are people that have semi-bought a membership. They pay in taxes, a residence there, although they're not full residents. They're not naturalized citizens, if you would. And that's what the Apostle Paul's writing to. So that's you, the Gentiles. You think you're part of the Jewish nation. You think you're part of the church. You are. Now you are, because Jesus Christ is being built up as a church. His foundation. He is the cornerstone, and we're being built on top of him. You see in this the Holy Spirit, Holy Trinity. God the Father made Jesus the cornerstone, and the last word there in the last verse, for the dwelling of the Spirit, the church, the church. It's talking about a building? No. It's talking about the people of the church, you and me. But we do love our building too, and we love that. You know, you've heard it, you've said it so many times over the last 2 or 3 months when we were home. Don't take it personally, but we were home watching that preacher in that little 2-inch box. We got so tired of that, didn't we? We loved him. But we're watching him in that little 2-inch cell phone. I finally realized, you know, it's not so bad. I can just sit this on the arm of my recliner, turn the volume up, and I can go get me a cup of coffee, come back, and not miss a beat, still listening to him. And I did some of that. But I got spoiled by it. And now all of a sudden I got to come back and listen to him. But oh, isn't it great to be back together? I miss my congregation. I miss being here, the fellowship with each other. I miss seeing that old preacher face to face. But now to be right here, it is a good thing. It's a good thing. The church is the people. But yet, there's something about the building that we love too. And we need to hold on to that. I attended a conference many years ago as a hospice chaplain. We had a subject matter expert, SME if you would, speaking to us. It was an all-day conference. It was 3 sessions, about an hour and a half apiece. He had written 3 books. The first session was on book 1, book 2, book 3. But book 3, the book was When Steeples Cry. And that has always stuck with me, when steeples cry. And what he was talking about, when churches cry, they cry when they lose a pastor through death. They cry when they lose a church elder, church founder, somebody that's been in the church for years, and then he dies or she dies. And it hurts, and the steeples cry. I want to submit to you, steeples cried all over Bay County, October the 10th, 2018. I want to submit to you, steeples cried all over our world back when the pandemic started hitting us. Steeples cry because they couldn't be here and they were doing that. Steeples cry. We missed the building, if you would. Yes, we found out, and yes, we do know that the church is more than the building. But I miss my building. I miss being in that building. I miss being here with you, and it does something. So I told Pastor Blake back in April, God keeps dealing with me about when the church is going through what it's going through. The church triumphant. Let the church be the church. I heard that song the first time back in 74, 75 at a concert in Pensacola, Florida, presented by Truth. This was a group out of Spring Hill Baptist Church in Mobile, Alabama, and college students from Mobile University. They traveled all over, and I didn't know it until today. Craig was telling me several of the kids that graduated from that went on to start their own bands, and several of them very active professional careers in gospel music. But they were a wonderful group, wonderfully trained, beautiful music. But they sang that, and I mean, it just brought the house down in that church in Pensacola. We were all excited. We were all becoming Baptist-Costals, if you would. We got excited about it. The church triumphant. Well, I want to say to you today, let the church be the church. Let the church be the church in its meaning. What I mean by its meaning, you're going to get a lot of alliteration today. Its meaning was constantly changing. Let the church be the church in its meaning, constantly changing. What do I mean by that? Buildings change. Buildings change all the time. Folks, I don't know if you know it, but that young man sitting all the way in the back there, Dick Claggett, was working here back 17, 18 years ago. For many years, but I don't know up to last year. But you were remodeling this church. Mark Mercer had done a beautiful job in the architectural work, and now you were going to work, tearing it all out and rebuilding it. I can bet you that you had a lot of excitement about that, but I can bet you that there were one or two people saying, no, I don't want to change my church. I don't want to change anything. I want it to stay like it is. But now you see this beautiful cathedral, this beautiful church, and we're all happy about it. We love it. The church is constantly changing, and that's okay. Port St. Joe, First Baptist, many of you saw it on the news last week. They finally are tearing their building down to start the rebuilding of a new building, but not at the same location. They're building it about 3 blocks away, and they're going to just clear that land for some kind of community center. And I think of that, and I'm sure that pastor and those leaders, the leadership team of that church are going through, no, we don't want to change it. No, we don't want this. No, we want to build just like we had it. And I listened to that, and the meaning of the church is constantly changing. But those people that they interviewed said, yes, I was born here. My parents were here with me. And then I was later baptized here. And then I was later married here. My parents were buried here. And it went on, the memories. And you have some of those same precious memories right here of Emmanuel Baptist. Many of you are Springfield Baptist. And you know of all of those things. It's okay to love the building. It's okay to know it. Folks, I can tell you, going back to Springfield, I could see my little wife sitting back on that 3rd or 4th pew back, 2nd or 3rd seat in, every Sunday. That was her seat. But an amazing thing, I go back to the church before that, 2 or 3 pews back to my right, 2nd or 3rd seat in. Going back to my military chapels, 2 or 3 pews back to my right, 2nd or 3rd seat in. It was just something like that, and I always remember that. Weezy, you sitting there today. Well, that's where it was. I was looking to see, well, you more than the 4 pews back. This is an empty pew there. But I look at that, and it's a fond memory, and you'll always cherish those fond memories. You have those memories of where your loved ones sat here in this church, where they were, and where you sat with them. It's okay to love the building, but recognize the true church. Recognize that the true church is the people of God, or the people of God, whichever way you want to use that, people singular, people plural. That's the true church. I have worshiped in many locations. I have had some wonderful experiences. I worshiped in the snow on Mount Fuji with my Marines. I worshiped out on the battlefield, the ranges, I should say, gun ranges, where the artillery cannon was my back prop as I was there. The Marines would come out and set up MRE boxes, throw a canvas camouflage cover over it, and then I put my cross on it. My cross was about yay big, gold, But then as soon as I was over, I'd turn it around where the crucifix was there. The priest would come in and use the same altar, put his chalice there, and do that. We worshiped out in the field. We could do it on the forecastle. That's the front end, the pointy end of the Navy ship. In the middle of the med, with Mount Vesuvius in our background. Beautiful locations to do it. The chapel on the ship, I had the ship that it was the only known ship to have wooden pews. We were blessed. And we had that, a beautiful little chapel. But it didn't matter where we worshiped, Fort Bragg, Fort Benning, out in the field, in a chapel, beautiful cathedral-type chapel. It was always the same thing, the people of God. God has always had a people, the song said. The church lives. The church is alive. The meaning of the church. Let the church live on in its meaning, constantly changing. But also, we think of the method in that. The methods change in that church. The methods change. Pastor mentioned Sunday school. We're going to talk about how we're going to reopen Sunday school. What are we going to do on that? And you know, I can tell you I have been through a lot of changes over the years in churches and Sunday schools. But I've always been taught, and I always believe, that you grow a church through the Sunday school. You grow a church through the personal Bible study. No matter how big a church gets, those cell groups, the Sunday school, is what holds it together. Now that's what we fight and fuss if we say, man, I'd love to take this active member out of your Sunday school class and let him or her teach this class. You don't touch my Sunday school class. No. We're not going to break up by age group. No. We're not going to break up by couples' ages. No. We're not going to break up by gender. We fight it. But we must recognize that the church is constantly changing, whether that's in the Sunday school, whether that's in the style of worship. Is it a secret to anybody that I'm an old traditionalist? I like to pick up the hymnal and look at the hymnal. I like to wear a coat and tie every Sunday. I'm a traditionalist, but folks, there's nothing wrong with having the words up there. In fact, I've come to like it. I've come to enjoy not having to pick up a hymnal to see it. I can read those words better than I can read the hymnal right here or right here. I can read those. The church is constantly changing, and we have to be willing to change with it. The methods change. Discipleship methods. We teach others. That is our great commission, to disciple one another, disciple other people, bring them in, lead them to Christ, and then disciple them. How are we doing that? Are we discipling them? Are we teaching them? We taught them one way 25 years ago. We taught them another way 20 years ago, another way 15 years ago. There's always a new method of how to do this, and we must learn how to do it. The same with evangelism. I go back to way back then when I was a new Christian. Kennedy was Evangelism Explosion. It was Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church down in Florida. Came up with a beautiful program, Evangelism Explosion. Jane and I went through that training. I went with my pastor as my partner, and we were so blessed to lead so many people to Christ. I still use a lot of the information from Evangelism Explosion, but there have been cubes now, evangelism cubes, countless other evangelism techniques. The biggest thing is tell somebody about Jesus. Whether you use Evangelism Explosion, whether you use a cube, use your lips. Go tell them. Use your feet. Go knock on the doors. Go tell them that that's what it is. Church, remember that the church's meaning is constantly changing. But any of you Latin scholars, you can correct me afterwards. Don't interrupt me. Ubi Christus, ibi ecclesia. Ubi Christus, ibi ecclesias. Where God is, there is the church. Where Christ is, there is the church. Let the church be the church, folks. Let it be the church in its meaning, constantly changing, but also let it be the church and I can't remember which one I did second, its message. Excuse me. Let it be the church in its message. Let it be the church that is consistently constant. Now, wait a minute, preacher. Did you hear what I said a minute ago? Constantly changing. What did I just say? Consistently constant. Am I talking out of both sides of my mouth? No, I'm not. It is consistently constant in its message. What is the message of the church? Jesus. 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 Born, died, resurrected, and is in heaven on the right hand of God. Jesus coming again. That's the message of Jesus. That's the message that can never grow old. And that is a constant. It's consistently constant. You know, when you come to church, it's not about the guy standing in the pulpit. And by the way, thank you for letting me share this pulpit. That's a sacred thing to a preacher, is this pulpit. This pulpit is given to his oversight. He is responsible for what comes out of this pulpit. So if I ain't blow anything today and I mess it up, it's Blake's fault. He let me get in the pulpit. Blame him. But again, what a sacred thing to be able to come there. But it's not about the preacher, folks. That's not the message about our preacher. It's not about our deacons. It's not about our leadership team. It's not about our Sunday school teachers. It's not about the song program and the music program, although, Craig, thank you. What a beautiful job today. And I miss that choir. Looking forward to getting that choir back up there. But, folks, it's about Jesus. Now, we can proclaim him through the read word, through the spoken word, through the sung word. We proclaim him a lot of different ways. But again, I come back to saying we got to use our feet and our lips outside the four walls to proclaim him. We've got to get out there and do it and let him know. The message is all about Jesus, not about anything else. And it is a consistently constant message. William Barclay is a old-time theologian. His theology didn't always still doesn't jive fully with mine, but he has some great points and some great things. He had an illustration that he said was an old illustration, and he's been deceased for a number of years, so we're talking 100 years or more is the illustration. The illustration was when Jesus returned to heaven. He was sitting there with all of his angels. All the angels were looking at him and talking to him, and Gabriel asked him something. Said, Jesus, it must have been terrible. Jesus said it was. He said, I see your scars that are still left there. It had been horrible for you. He said, yes, it was. He said, but Jesus, do all the people there know what you did for them? Do they know what happened? He says, no, only a few people in Palestine know about it. Well, Jesus, how are you going to make sure everybody knows about it? He said, well, I told Peter, James, John, and a few others to go and tell everybody, and for them to go and tell others, and for them to go and tell others until the word spreads to the furthest most parts of the world, and that everybody would know. They've got to go and tell everybody. Gabriel thought for a moment. Gabriel knew mankind. He knew what we were. He knew our pitiful state. He said, but Lord, what if they don't do it? What if they just don't? Lord, they may do it for a year or two, a few years, but what about the 21st century? People start forgetting you and they don't tell the story and they don't tell everybody. Then what? What's your plan B? Jesus says, I don't have a plan B. I'm trusting the people. I'm trusting the church. Let the church be the church. Let the church tell others about Jesus. Let the church continue to go and do that. Yes, we've got to remember that we've got to let the church be the church in its mission, which is constantly changing, in its message, which is consistently constant, but let the church be the church in its mission, which is constantly comforting. Constantly comforting a lost and dying world, comforting them with the message of Christ. I don't know how long it's been since you've led somebody to Christ, but do you remember the joy that you felt when they prayed that sinner's prayer? Do you remember the joy they showed as they did that? I'll never forget the very first one I led to the Lord. I was young. Many of you old enough to remember the Jesus Freaks. He was a Jesus freak. He was a beach bum. He always wore shorts to church, and I'm talking back in the 70s, early 70s, and sleeveless muscle shirt, and surfboard tied to his car and headed to the beach when he left. But he and I led, it was my wife's niece, no, but my wife's cousin, to the Lord. She was a 17-year-old girl. Led her to the Lord in my house there one day. And she cried and she rejoiced. And we were so happy and so thrilled. And I'll never forget that. My first one to lead to Christ. Fortunately, there have been many others since then, but the feeling never gets old. The joy that you feel knowing that you have a new brother, a new sister that's coming to heaven with you. Oh, that mission. It's constantly comforting a sin-sick world. A sin-sick world that needs Jesus. But today's age is constantly comforting a disease-sickened world. We have a disease, a pandemic. Everybody's afraid. Everybody's frightened about it. We, the church, have to give a comforting message to them. We have to remind them that, yes, there's a Jesus in control. There's a great physician that's over all of this. There's a great physician that's going to help us through this. The church's mission is to be that comforting church to this troubled world. Oh, we're having so much trouble now. We're having all the issues that are going on with the civil unrest, the racism, all of these things that are happening. The world needs to know Jesus has it. The world needs to know that Jesus is in control. The world needs to know that the church is still a safe haven. The world needs to know that the church is inclusive. The world needs to know that all are welcome in God's house. We have to be that inclusive community that opens our doors to everybody and welcomes them and brings them in. I didn't say we have to agree with everything of everybody that comes in that door, but we have to welcome everybody. We have to love everybody, and we have to tell them what Jesus says, and then let it be between them and Jesus. We've got to love them, folks. We've got to help them and do that. Oh, our world is troubled, but we're comforting a world that's taking their eyes off of Jesus. We need to help them refocus. We need to help them get that 2020 vision for 2020. Saw a Facebook post this morning. It was so funny. Larry Granger, I think many of you know Larry, policeman here in town, bluegrass picker and grinner. But Larry said, in police, code 20 means mentally ill. Does 2020 mean crazy, crazy? I think he's right. I think he's right. Crazy, crazy is what's happened in 2020, and we think of that. But folks, we haven't lost our mission, and we still have to think of what we're doing. But Pastor, you're exactly right. We're a church, we're a world today that needs the comforting reminder of prayer, prayer, prayer. Prayer makes a difference. Prayer makes a difference for the prayer, but for the prayee, the people we're praying for. We've got to be doing that. Oh, you can share illustration after illustration after illustration of how many people have felt the power of prayer. How many people have come back and said, you won't believe what happened to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then you realize, that's when God woke me up and I prayed for that person. It happens, folks. There's illustration after illustration. But I want you to think with me for a minute. You business-minded people, in the corporate world, we always had a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan. I never could do more than 5 years, usually do more than 5 minutes, but the plan in the future. And I think back to my 5-year plan in 2015. What was your vision in 2015 for the next 5 years? What was your plan in 2015 for the next 5 years? I can tell you mine was real simple. I was with Covenant Hospice. About this time of the year, I turned in my notice, my retirement papers. I was going to retire middle of July. Don Hodges was talking to me. He was going to retire from Springfield Baptist. He said, let me turn in your resume. I said, no, I don't want to do anything. I want to retire. I'm going to retire. God had other plans. And Springfield, thank you for putting up with me and taking me. But that was God's call. But I had not planned on doing that. But then other things happened. I hadn't planned on a Hurricane Michael. It happened. I hadn't planned on a pandemic. It happened. How many of you planned for the pandemic? Well, I didn't think so. I don't think any of you planned for Hurricane Michael until the night before. I think of all of those things, the 5-year vision, the 5-year plan. You've heard it said, God hears our plans and laughs. He does. He does. But folks, that's why our mission is constantly comforting. No matter what circumstances come, we have to comfort one another. We have to comfort this world. We have to comfort them by putting our arms around them, the outreach arms of the church, to say, we are here, and we want to take care of you, and we will take care of you. A comforting touch, a comforting plan to be there. Now, 2020, what's our vision for 2025? What's our vision for the end of 2020? I'm looking forward to 2021, I think. Somebody wrote the other day, whatever happened to all that was supposed to happen for those black eyed peas I ate on January the 1st of 2020? Any of you superstitious do that? What else is it you eat? I did too. But didn't seem to work. Well, let me conclude. Let me wrap this up. We've got food back there. Let the church be the church. Folks, it is the church triumphant. And when we're looking at the church, when we look at its meaning, we look at its methods, we look at its message, we look at its mission, we go on and on and on with the M's. There are a lot of them. we must remember that we've got to be willing to move with the church. We've got to be willing to adapt with the church. We've got to do it. That means never saying never. Again, preacher and I were talking this week, and I laughed about the times I've said never. When I got out of the United States Army Reserve, I hung up that uniform, and I said to my wife and my babies, I'll never again put on another uniform. You know the story. About 10 years later, I'll go to the Navy as a chaplain. 20 years later, I'll take that uniform off. I didn't say I'll never put another one on, but I don't think I will, not even for burial. But anyway, we just won't do that anymore. But God makes us eat those words. We say never. This is what I laughed about. I left as a young, ultra-conservative, idealistic preacher to my first church, and I had gone, I will never marry a person that's been through a divorce. I just don't believe that's scriptural. Woo, I ate those words, and I found out how wrong I was. The very first wedding I was asked to do, a high school coach for a baseball team in a neighboring school, neighboring community, fine Christian man, leading many of his players to Christ, but his wife had left him. The church pianist, a wonderful, sweet, sweet lady, been playing the piano, volunteer there in the church for years. She and her husband had divorced, and they were dating, and they were engaged, and they wanted to be married, wanted me to marry them. Two fine Christians. Now, her uncle, the other side of the story, came to me and said, Preacher, I think you need to have my niece to stand up before the church and apologize for divorcing. I said, huh? Do what? He was the chairman of the deacons. He said, I think we need to have her to stand up in front of the church and apologize for divorcing. I said, wait a minute. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't her husband arrested for drug abuse? Didn't her husband molest her daughter? Didn't her husband beat her till she had to be hospitalized? So yes, we need to apologize to her for not intervening earlier. She doesn't need to apologize to us for anything. She left as she should have left. And I did marry them, and he became a friend after that. But anyway, we got along fine. But I could not say no. And I learned, God, who am I to judge? Shame on me. Shame on me. Shame on me. Never say never, folks. But then the worst one, and I'm still trying to get over this. I had sworn, Jeff Lord back there will tell you, he was my Facebook representative as long he and Jane. Jane would always tell me, I saw this on Facebook, I saw that on Facebook. I said, I will never get on Facebook. What'd you do? You put YouTube on there, you put Facebook on there. The only way we could listen to the church here was to go on Facebook. So I had to go and join Facebook. And now I'm getting it all day, every day, middle of the night. I hear that beep, I open my eyes and look at it, see what it is. Folks, never say never. God's spreading his gospel. I told Joey this morning, I said, Joey, I don't know a lot about Facebook. I don't know how to respond to a lot of these things, but I appreciate your posts, brother. I do. Weezy and several of you put a lot of posts on there. They're good things. Greta, I see yours on there a lot. It goes on and on. A lot of you put posts on there, and I read them, but I don't know how to respond to many of them. But it is a wonderful tool. My point is, let the church be the church. The church is triumphant. The church is triumphant because of people like you. The church is triumphant because God has always had a people. The words that Beezy was singing, or saying, speaking over the words that we were singing, says, listen, child of God, it's alive. Discouraged pastor, it's his church and it's still alive. Lonely missionary, sow that seed with confidence. The church is still alive. Old saint, you're not alone or forgotten. The church is still alive. It's alive, my broken-hearted friend. It's still alive. Busy mothers, just keep trusting in Jesus. The church is alive. You're not alone out there, men. Just keep looking to Jesus. The church is alive. The church is alive. Faithful fathers, there's rest in the Lord. God's church is still alive. So, family of God, lift your hands and praise the Lord. The church, God's church triumphant, is alive. It's alive, my friends, alive and well. That's you, the church. Now, what are we going to do with the church that's alive? How are we going to keep it alive? How are we going to be willing to let it live and let it be triumphant? We're going to do it by us being triumphant. We're going to do a hymn of invitation. Pastor Blake, if you'll come stand in front to receive anybody. And Craig, you come. I don't even know the song, but the words will be up here. And you just sing along as the musicians come. But as they come, and let me pray. Father, we thank you that we're part of your magnificent church.